As a resident of Cupertino, I really look forward to receiving the quarterly publication of the Cupertino Parks and Recreations Department. This publication lists classes of all kinds for all ages, ranging from toddlers to teens to adults and to seniors. You will also see what is being offered in the way of cultural and seasonal events, as well as other activities. Park locations throughout the city are listed, as well as the many buildings where residents can participate in the activities being offered. This publication is an expression of the Parks and Recreation Department's mission. That mission is to provide a positive, healthy, connected community through a vast variety of programs, quality facilities, and special events. With us today in the studio are two current members of the Parks and Recreation Department Commission, as well as one recent past member of the Parks and Recreation Commission. And they're here today to tell us how the Commission goes about supporting the Parks and Recs Department in fulfilling their mission.
Welcome to The Better Part, a program that encompasses a diverse spectrum of topics important to our community, which we hope will both inform and entertain you. We invite you to sit back and enjoy the program.
I really would like to thank you, gentlemen, for taking the time to be with us in the studio today to talk about your job on the Parks and Recs Commission. And for our viewing audience, I'd like to introduce each one of you separately. Sitting opposite me is Darcy Paul, who is the current chairman of the Parks and Recs Commission. He also happens to be the director of the Cupertino Chamber of Commerce. I know he's also on the board of directors for the Cupertino Historical Society, a very busy volunteer in Cupertino. Sitting to Darcy's right is Jeffrey Paulson. He's a current vice chairman of the Parks and Recs Commission, and he has been with us before when he was serving on the Bicycle and Pedestrian Commission many years ago. So another great volunteer for the city of Cupertino. And sitting to my left is David Greenstein, who is a recent past member of the commission, and we've invited him to join this particular session because he was on board the commission at the very early ages of the Stevens Creek corridor development, phase 1. And he'll be talking about that later in the program. Darcy, I happened to watch your program, Cablecast, 5 June, 7 p.m. on Channel 26. And Carol Atwood, who's the current director of that department, replacing Mark Linder, who's gone on to be the city manager at Coop Campbell. Carol talked about the 31 capital developments that are underway. And I know 31 is a large number. Can you give the audience an example of what some of these are?
Sure. So actually we have approximately 31, as you mentioned, of these capital improvement projects that are currently underway. And when we were getting an update regarding those projects, they're really classified according to what Public Works is working on at the moment. And so they classify them according to discrete projects. The biggest project with respect to the financial commitment of the city right now is the environmental center that's being built at McClellan Ranch. And out of approximately $6.5 million that's being spent on what they call Priority 1 projects right now, the McClellan Ranch Environmental Center project is taking about $2.5 million of those funds. So you can imagine that there are a lot of projects out there. A few of them deal with McClellan Ranch. A few of them deal with Wilson Park, one of the parks that hasn't been updated for a while, and one of them does deal with Portal Park as well. And yeah, I think the city does a really good job in terms of prioritization of these projects, because when we were given our update from the Public Works Department, they prioritized in terms of 4 different tranches. And for these Priority 1 projects, they have about less than half of the total number of projects that they're working on. And then, of course, they have priorities 2 through 4 as well. So if you're interested in looking more into what the specifics of those are, They tend to reach the various facilities of the Parks and Recreation community, such as Quinlan Center and the Senior Center. But 31 sounds like a lot, but in fact, a lot of them are multiple projects for particular areas and places.
Yes, well, I know the Blackberry Farm improvements, I visited after some years of not visiting, and I was stunned how wonderful it is. And I recently got a hold of a number for the projects. We're talking about $11.36 million that the city has budgeted for these projects. So the citizens of Cupertino should be aware of that. They're doing a great job in upgrading and maintaining. I know maybe Jeff want to talk about the gravel pit alongside Lawrence Expressway and what the planning there is for that.
Well, actually, that's on the unfunded list at this time.
Okay.
But David and I are very interested in seeing a park built along Lawrence Expressway where there's currently a pile of gravel.
Mm-hmm.
And our listeners can, our viewers can see it there along Lawrence Expressway.
I see.
And so the idea is that we would, that is, the city would buy a place where the county could store its gravel, and then we in turn would make that into a park. It's right on Saratoga Creek,
Mm-hmm.
so it would make a wonderful creekside park as well as an extension of a bicycle path that's along Lawrence Expressway. And David, you may want to add something about that property since you've been interested in it.
Yeah, I've been interested in it a long time. This particular property is in an area that is underserved as far as parks go.
Is that the Rancho Rinconado area?
The Rancho Rinconado area, and they very much are, the people there are very interested in expanding any opportunity they have. And there we have this prime piece of property that's being used for a different purpose right now, and it's closed off to the public. We have an opportunity of getting purview on this and then actually changing it over into a park. The last project that happened there at Rancho was a quarter-acre piece of land that was converted into a park, and then a trail was built along the creek. So they already have some park facility there, but it's very small compared to the area and the number of people there. And if we just add this extra piece of property, we would have another 6, maybe 7 acres. So it's a great opportunity.
I think another example of the city's building parks is the Franco Park, adjacent to housing that at one time was a tennis court. And I know when I drive by it on Homestead Avenue, I've seen the park go in, and it looks like it's very small, but you, in our discussion before the program, you were telling us how much of benefit it is offered, particularly in the evening. Darcy, can you talk about that?
Oh, certainly. And it actually coincides with the first time that I joined the Parks and Recreation Commission back in 2007. And that was in fact the first project that David and I were working on as co-commissioners back then. I think around that time David had just joined and I joined, and our director at that point was Therese Smith, right before she retired. And that apartment complex is actually the place that my wife and I and our daughter lived before we bought our house in Cupertino a couple of years ago. And so we're very familiar with that particular park. But the interesting thing about it, and I think one thing that really speaks to the ability to improve the input and get involved, is that when we were thinking about the various design and elements of the park itself, one of the comments I believe from the public was that, well, this tennis court off of the apartment complex is right next to Homestead, and that's a rather busy street. Are you worried at all about small children from parents in the complex coming over and running off into Homestead? And from the commission, there was a suggestion that, well, why don't we put a low-lying, kind of aesthetically pleasing fence around that park? And the wheels grind kind of slow. When you're looking right at that particular area for month after month, you kind of get a little bit impatient. But eventually they made a really nice park,
yes.
And it had a fence.
Yes.
And I know from personal experience that that's one of the favorite parks of parents around that area to bring their kids, because it does have that that fence that prevents kids from going out into Homestead.
Well, I know driving by, every time I drive by, I'm almost tempted to park my car in the large commercial parking lot and wander over into the park. And it does have all the equipment for children to play in. It's delightful. I know, Jeff, that you emailed me about the strategic plans for the city, one of which was the Civic Center, and also the Stevens Creek corridor that's opening on the 1st of July. Can you tell us a little about the Civic Center plans?
Well, yeah, I think what's happening is you have an urban planner as a city manager, and now you have a former planning director as the assistant city manager. So there are a lot of plans going on. And the Civic Center, its uses are changing. The library's become so popular that it's impossible to find a parking space in the afternoon after school gets out. And if you've ever been to a meeting at City Hall in the afternoon, you can attest to that. The other thing is that the city's considering moving the teen center out of the basement of the sports center and over to the City Hall, and then also making some kind of use of the creek that's adjacent to the field there, turning that into a place where people can go and sit under a tree and have lunch and enjoy the creek. So there's some options there, and again, it's in the early stages of development. I think, Darcy, you're on the task force for that, is that right?
I am on the task force for that. And speaking of the park that you were mentioning, maybe next to the creek, that actually speaks to another item that we're currently looking at, which is implementing parklets inside of the city. And I just wanted to mention it because it was your idea initially about 2 or 3 months ago, and we really brought that forward pretty quickly. And I think it's such a great idea, because if you look at our adjoining communities, we have Mountain View and Los Gatos, and they have various areas that are really nice to walk along particular corridors and streets. And one of the factors that makes them nice is that you're able to sit down at a bench, just enjoy your coffee or various other things that you purchase from a restaurant along the street. And I think that would add a lot, with respect to a very relatively low cost kind of measure that can help out the community. So really looking forward to working on that.
Yeah, I'm excited. I kind of brought that forward really for a couple of reasons. One is it makes for a very nice urban environment, a place where people can come and sit down. Mountain View has actually turned some of their parking spaces on Castro Street into little parks where people can enjoy a meal, cup of coffee, that kind of thing. But also, as a former park ranger, I'm very interested in having opportunities for kids to go to the end of the street and have a little bit of wilderness, a little bit of open space. And so we hope to find little areas in the city that we can put maybe a little play facility and maybe a bench or two, a chessboard, a tree. Not a big expensive place, but a place where people can have a little bit of recreation without having to arrange to have parents drive them across town.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Now, you also mentioned in one of your emails that the title of the Parks and Recreations Department is changing. What will be the new title? And I understand there's new responsibilities, for example, like emergency preparedness, block captains, sustainability. What does all that mean?
Well, I think what that means is that we have a very competent parks director, Carol Atwood, and
Yes.
when you demonstrate competence over the long term, she used to be the city's budget director.
Yes.
And I don't know if you recall, but the city of Cupertino has done well financially when all other cities, or many other cities, were really struggling. So because she's now parks director, they've decided to add some other related functions, disaster preparedness, as you mentioned, the block captain program, which has been actually an award-winning, very successful program, and then the emergency preparedness function, which is not always important, but when it's needed, it's extremely important.
We mentioned earlier on that a big event on 1 July 2014 is occurring, and that is the grand opening of the Stevens Creek corridor or trail. I'd like to ask David if he would go back to the year, I think 2006, when all this was first bubbling up, and give us some background.
Sure, and actually it goes further back than that, Bill. It goes way back to when the city purchased the property, And this is a 60-acre piece of land that goes from Stevens Creek all the way through to McClellan Ranch. And this piece of property, it could have gone to developers, but the city was smart enough to get this and buy this property. Now we have the wonderful park there, and we have the golf. Well, we didn't have that all that time. When we first got the property, it was a commercial property. It was being used by mostly non-residents as a place to go to picnic, but they'd have to pay for picnics, so it was commercial. And then when the city took it over, they continued the commercial operation. Well, it was always thought by the city that we should turn this back to the public because it's owned by the public. And in the early, was around 2000, they looked at Stevens Creek Trail, and they wanted to put a trail through the property. And that opened up all the possibilities of what to do with the rest of the property. So they called in the community and they said, what would you like? Why don't you draw some pictures? And kids got involved and parents got involved and all kinds of community members got involved, and they drew what they thought were the plans for this park. And what it ended up to be was something that happened in 2009, where the project took hold. They redid the creek, made it much more natural than it was before because it had been utilized for so many other purposes. Now it was going to be a natural creek. They put in a trail. They have picnic facilities, and it's open to the public. So we've realized an incredible dream that Cupertino has had for quite a long time since they've owned that property. And now we're going to see the second phase of the project, and that's in this trail that's going to open up.
Well, I think I was talking to Jeff at one of our meetings prior to this program where you mentioned putting in a cricket pitch. Some of them, even the fact of Blackberry golf course might be in jeopardy. They might put something there that we never thought about. Talk about that.
I wouldn't say in jeopardy, but what I would say is that the city is changing. I mean, the demographics of the city are changing since the time I moved here 27 years ago. And what's happening is that the interest in sports are changing too. Cupertino has a internationally known cricket team.
Yes.
And so the city has decided, as part of its planning process with these two planners at the head two places in the city organization, to really step back and take a look at that whole area and ask the residents, what do you want to see? So they've retained a consulting firm to solicit input from the public, and then based on that input, they'll develop some recommendations for possibilities for that land. So yes, it could be that the golf course would be replaced by a cricket field or a cricket pitch. We don't know at this point what's going to happen. But we do know that it's important for our listeners and our viewers to participate in this process. If you have an interest, get involved, and this is the time, because something's going to be different, I know, and what it is really up to the people.
Wonderful. I think, Darcy, the Cupertino Historical Society currently has a display in Quinlan Center in their little museum about cricket, because we do have a large immigrant population that brought the sport with them, and they're very avid. It's quite interesting. This program would be cablecast long after the 1 July, but perhaps we can in the future look forward to an update and more information about that. Now, I know Jeff had mentioned at one of our meetings that Parkside Trail, as I recall the phrase you used, and that there's a group that owns property there other than the city, and that the gist of it is that between Parkside group and the Stevens Creek corridor, that the plan is to have a trail from ending, I guess, at McClellan Ranch to the coast. Can you talk about that?
Well, I guess this goes back perhaps to my interest in a connecting trail. I hiked the Skyline to the Sea Trail when I was engaged to my wife, and with a few friends we did that hike. And so the idea of hiking from the bay to the coast is one that's been in the minds of people for decades. To have both a trail around the bay and then a trail around the ridge surrounding the bay, and then also these connecting spokes. So we are actually getting to the point where in the next few years we'll have an opportunity to build a trail first from McClellan Road, following the course of an old quarry truck road up to Linda Vista Park. And then beyond Linda Vista Park is a part of Cupertino that I'd never seen before until 2 weeks ago, and that is there's an old abandoned gravel pit, a huge yawning quarry that you really can't see from any road, but if you look on Google, of course, you can see it. But the idea would be to connect a trail through Linda Vista Park and then through that gravel pit area and up into other parks belonging to the Mid-Peninsula Open Space District and to the county park system, so that then one could connect to other trails belonging to the state and hike all the way to the coast.
That's remarkable.
Yeah.
That's remarkable. Cupertino is really getting connected with all these other places. Center of the universe we're becoming. Some recent accomplishments. I've heard a lot about, they call it a dog park. I've heard it called a bark park. Where is the bark park and what is its purpose?
Well, the dog park is along Mary Avenue, and it's just south of the Mary Avenue Bridge and a little bit north of Stevens Creek. We had a, let's call it a very rigorous discussion on the city level regarding whether to allow dogs off leash in our city parks approximately, I think about 6 years ago now. And we just had the ribbon cutting for the dog park. And you know, I think one of the functions that we'd really like to convey with respect to what the commission does is that a lot of the times we serve at the pleasure of the city council. I should add, preface that with, a lot of the times some of these measures are, you know, a bit contentious, to be quite frank. But I think if we take the position where we listen to the community input, you know, ultimately you get a real sense of where the overall tenor of the attitudes are and where the concerns lie. So this, you know, to my mind, is a really good outcome with respect to the issue that arose about 6 years ago. And now we do have a space in the community for people to allow their dogs off leash. There are separate areas for small dogs and large dogs, and so, you know, you know, the dog owners' pets can get their exercise on a daily basis if people wish to go over there to Mary Avenue. And I think that it equates a lot to these types of issues that we may be running into in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So the Stevens Creek corridor, to be distinguished from the Stevens Creek Trail, Phase 1 and Phase 2, might, you know, give us some of these issues where people have differing opinions as to, you know, what should we do with this space that's directly east of the Stevens Creek Trail and encompasses the Blackberry Farm golf course right now. Some people say that this is an enormous expanse of space. It's a huge opportunity to have sports fields, of which some of the field space could be cricket pitches and other types of activities that people engage in, such as maybe badminton and tennis or softball and the like. But at the same time, I think the really important function that we discharge on the commission is that we provide a mechanism for people to express their opinions and to, you know, give their input to ultimately the city council.
Yeah, that was one of my concerns. How do you get input from the city? And I guess at your monthly meeting you have three-minute oral input from citizens about these various items. Most of us get our news from the Cupertino Courier about what's happening, and you have provided a forum for people to come and make their wishes known or their displeasure known. That's good. Going back to your relationship with the City Council and the department, how do you get your marching orders for the year? I understand that you sit down with the City Council and they write a letter. Tell us about that.
The process that I've seen throughout the past 7 years is that every year around August or September or July, we have a meeting of the commission where we have a proposed work plan drawn out at the conclusion of that meeting. So what ends up happening is that in the following month, in August or September, we end up presenting that work plan to the City Council, and they look at it, and at that point they ask us, well, maybe, you know, this particular item, we're not that, you know, maybe we can put that on the back burner, and then there are other issues that we'd like to add to your work plan over the year. So that's kind of the initial conversational point, but, you know, ultimately, whenever the City Council would like us to take a look at a particular issue, it's, you know, at their pleasure that we serve ultimately. So we're a 5-member appointed commission.
Okay.
And so
It's all volunteer. You have men and women on your commission. And the city is always looking for volunteers. They have several commissions working. So if anybody watching the program would like to call City Hall and sign up. Listen, I really appreciate your being here to explain to me and to our viewers a little bit about what's happening in Parks and Recs and what your commission is responsible for. I think it's very enlightening, and particularly when you put a dollar number to the amount of work that projects that are the city's funding, you really have an important job to do. Thank you for coming.
thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We hope you found this program interesting and informative. And if you're interested in seeing the Commission on live cablecast, you can tune in on the first Thursday of every month at 7 p.m. to Cupertino Channel 26. You can also reach the Parks and Recs Department by calling 408-777-3120. And their website is parks@cupertino.org. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you again next week, same day, same time, same channel. Goodbye until then.